Ciders are a quick and easy fermentation that anyone can do, and adding flavors to your cider or beer is a great way to customize your drink depending on the season or your favorite flavors. But how you add that flavor is always up for debate. Do you get better results from real fruit or extracts? Is one better than the other? Today we'll do some side-by-side comparisons to find out. And this effortless blueberry cider is one you'll definitely want to try this summer. I'm TheBruSho and this is TheBruSho. Let's do some experimenting with this delicious blueberry cider. Fruit additions versus extracts have been a long, heated debate in the home brewing forum. One party says you can't get the punch of flavor needed without extracts, while the other says there's nothing like using the real thing. I've always felt somewhere in between. For some fruits or adjuncts, I think you need to use an extract because the real thing is hard to find or it doesn't impart much flavor on its own, while other adjuncts can be bursting with juice or aromas, and using the real thing is all you need. So I decided to do a quick experiment and whip up a simple cider recipe that I can split and dose one with real blueberries and the other with blueberry extract. Then I'll taste them side by side and see which is better. Now I know this won't always be the case for every fruit or spice you add, but I hope that you can get some insight on how you might use these flavor additions to make the best drink possible. And it will be fun to see exactly how different or similar these can be. Now, let's brew. The recipe today is my super simple, tried and true cider recipe. I'm using some store-bought apple juice as the base. As always, make sure there's no preservatives in your juice that will inhibit yeast growth. Since I'll be splitting this up, I'm making a 2-gallon batch that I'll ferment in one vessel, and then split before packaging. As I said, this recipe is easy. Just dump the juice in, and add some yeast nutrients if you got them on hand. I'm using some DAP and Fermaid O, my go-to combo for nutrients. If you don't have these, don't worry about it, but consider getting some if you plan to brew a lot of ciders. They help a lot with off flavors in my experience. And lastly, the yeast. Whatever clean fermenting yeast you have on hand. I have some leftover SafAle US05 from a previous fermentation, so I'm using that. Then just shake it up, toss an airlock on, and set it in a cool dark place for 1 week to ferment. Oh, and if you're curious about gravity, most if not all store-bought juices have a gravity of 1.050. I brewed enough ciders that I stopped measuring, but if you wanted, you can always add more sugar for a stronger final product. After about 1 week, fermentation activity has slowed down, so I took a final gravity reading and got 1.001, which means this cider comes in at 6.4% ABV. We officially have cider. By the way, you might see me use a refractometer for final gravity a lot in my videos. If you do use a refractometer, just remember you need to use a calculator to adjust your reading since the presence of alcohol messes with the reading. Otherwise, they're really accurate, but you can always use a hydrometer if you want. No sweat. Upon tasting a sample, the cider had a nice dryness with a slight bit of sweetness at the end, which is pretty much right where I like it. If you make this recipe or any of my others, be sure to send me a pic on Instagram at TheBruSho. I'd love to see what you made. At this point, I'm now going to split the ciders up since they'll be getting different forms of flavoring. In order to keep them as identical as possible, I'm going to stabilize the cider. That way when I add fruit into half of this batch, the sugars from the fruit won't kick up fermentation again. Instead, I'll be getting the full fruit flavor and sweetness they impart. To do that, I'm going to dose 2 glass carboys with a Camden tablet and some potassium sorbate. These can easily be purchased at your homebrew store, but I also have linked them in the description for you to buy. They work in tandem to keep the yeast from reproducing once more sugars are added. Camden also has antioxidizing properties, which helps extend the cider's life. To add them, I quickly boil a small amount of water. I usually just zap it in the microwave until it starts boiling, and then add them until they dissolve. Then I pour that into the sanitized carboy. Dosing depends on the size of batch you're doing, so refer to package details for more information. And then evenly split them into the 2 carboys. I then add an airlock and let them sit in a dark spot for 1 day to allow those stabilizer powers to do their magic. 1 day later, it's now time to package up the cider with our flavor additions. You can use any fruit or seasonings you think would taste great in a cider. I've made apple pie cider, mango, hop cider, and even a pear chai cider. Let me know if you have a favorite cider that you've made. I'm going to be kegging the 2 gallons into separate kegs, each with their respective flavorings. In one, I'll be adding blueberry extract, and in the other, I'll be adding frozen blueberries. If you don't have a keg, I would suggest adding these additions into your secondary fermenter for a few days and then bottling. Just note that since we stabilize, you won't be able to bottle condition, so either skip the stabilizing or just have some still cider. So for keg number 1, I'm going to add the extract. Dosing depends on how much of a punch of flavor you want, but just be careful. The biggest pitfall with extracts is that you can easily overdo it and ruin your whole batch. Start with small amounts. You can always add more. Or you can do a dosing experiment as I've shown before. That helps you dial in the right amount. Then in keg number 2, I'm adding the frozen fruit. I found that 1 pound of fruit per gallon is a good general rule of thumb. Of course, this depends on how flavorful the fruit is. So I just add the frozen fruit into a sanitized mesh bag and then add that to the keg. With both flavor additions in, I transfer the cider in. Once they're in, I close them up, add my desired pressure. I usually go for about 15 psi, and then wait until they're carved up, at which point they're ready to taste and compare. And here they are. And as you can see, there's a pretty stark difference between the two of them. This is the extract version, and this is the fruited version. The extract version is a beautiful golden yellow, just like you would expect from a normal cider, while the fruited version took on a deep purple color from the blueberries. And when I take a sniff of these, they both have a distinctive blueberry aroma, and to be honest, I can't really tell a difference between them just on scent, so let's take a sip. Starting with the extract, I immediately get a much sharper flavor. It's very crisp, and the blueberry flavor is very prominent up front, but fades away very quickly. And when I take a sip of the fruited one, it has a much more smoother mouthfeel and rounded fruit flavor. And it reminds me more of like a fruit smoothie compared to the extract one. I'm getting much more of the crisp apple flavor on the extract version. The blueberry version really took on the blueberry flavor, I think, much more, which makes it more noticeable as a blueberry cider. Whereas on the extract one, when you take a sip, you're more thinking about what is in there. You get a sense of some other fruit flavor, but it's hard to pinpoint. And obviously the color definitely shows you that this is not just a regular cider. The more I sip on the extract version, I also get more of like a candy, a blueberry candy, or that artificial blueberry flavor, which isn't a bad thing necessarily. I enjoy it, but if you're more into like natural flavors, I think the fruited version would be much more up your alley. Yeah, I find myself going back to the fruited version more. I don't know what it is, maybe it's the color or that smoother, easy to drink flavor, but I'm really enjoying this one. I think the pros to extract are that you can achieve any flavor you want because there's so many readily available flavors out there. Also, a little bit goes a long way, so when you buy a bottle, you're only using a little bit at a time. And it's so easy to use anything from cider to beer to wine, anything you can think of. The cons with extract are that flavors tend to be a bit more artificial. You're not getting that fresh fruit flavor, you're getting more of a candied version of what you would expect. And some pros to the fruit are that you get that natural fruit flavor. Additionally, the fruit adds a little bit of that sweetness because there's some sugars present as well. So if you don't like dry ciders, adding some fruit can bump up the sweetness. And you also get the color added from the fresh fruit. Another con with fruit would be dependent on which fruit you choose. Some fruits, like I would say watermelon or other light flavored fruits, aren't going to add as much flavor as an extract would. But with this blueberry, I luckily got a lot of flavor out of it. Whether you choose extract or real fruit, you can't go wrong. But hopefully this experiment helps you to make the right choice for your next brew. And if you have any questions, be sure to comment down below, or you can reach out to me on the Discord server. There's a link in the description below. Thanks for watching, and cheers!